Hi, I'm Curious Cass, and this is Curiosity Junkie. Today's guest is a spiritual teacher, author, life coach, speaker, and he hosts his own podcast. Please welcome Glenn Ambrose to the show.
Hi, Glenn Ambrose. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about how we met. I found you on Insight Timer. I use that app every day to meditate, and I'm always looking for different topics on there and connecting with teachers that have a message that I need to hear. I feel like I'm attracted to it for a reason. And you popped up one day, and it was basically like a conversation, a little like my podcast. And I thought, oh, interesting. And then I realized you have a book out and you are a coach and you have a fantastic story. And so I wanted to have you on to share your story and a little bit about where you are today, but mostly your story, because I think that's the best part.
Okay.
So let's start with that, your story.
So let's start with this story. Whenever I start talking about my story, I try to give it the Reader's Digest version to some degree, because I mean, there's just so much. Yeah, here's the overview. I mean, I was raised in Massachusetts, wonderful family, very functional from the outside. And I just didn't fit. You know, I kind of had the ADHD bouncing off the walls, and I just didn't seem like it really fit in the family a little bit. Then I went to school and I really didn't fit there. I mean, I did well in school. It was very easy for me to get good grades, but I was constantly in the office because I could not sit at a desk for a long period of time. So I was just constantly entertaining myself and others, which was a common note on my report cards. And so, you know, really by the time I hit like junior high, it's, you know, Glenn, turn around, Glenn, stop talking, Glenn. When you hear your name in a negative context hundreds of times a day, year after year, it starts wearing on your self-esteem, you know? And I think that was like, by the time I hit 7th or 8th grade, I was like, okay, it's obvious that I can't be good, because there was periods where I really tried to control myself and I couldn't. So I was like, I'm exhausted. I feel like crap about myself. And, you know, so I knew some kids, you know, spending a lot of time at the office, you got to know some of the bad kids. So, so they were skipping school soon. And I was like, why don't I try being bad? Like, I wonder what that's like. I mean, I'm kind of in trouble anyway.
Right. I'm already here.
Right. So why don't I kind of earn it, you know? So I skipped school and I got in trouble, and my life really didn't change. I was always grounded at home. I was always at the office and school. And this time I had a lot of fun. And that was really the beginning of the end for the first portion of my life, because people lost control over me. Like I had no fear of consequences because I was already experiencing them. So I was like, bring it. Like, I am going to do whatever I want, however I want, whenever I want at, 13 years old age. And I was like, if you catch me, bring the consequences. My life is that way anyway.
My goodness.
So I was off and running, and which led me in high school. I found alcohol, and I was like, oh my God, I am who I always wanted to be. I was constantly walking around judging myself. I was constantly walking around in fear, insecure. And I didn't feel that way. I could flirt with the girls. I could flirt with the senior girls. I'd flirt with anybody. I could stand up for myself against the guys. Right. I could be witty. I had no inhibitions. And I was like, I love it. This is what I've been looking for, So I fell in love with alcohol just about immediately. And I was in a big town of big drinkers. So kind of most people drank like I did. I didn't, I could tell that I was a little bit different. I really loved it a little too much, but it wasn't that much.
Young, so you don't really register what that is.
Yeah, I just like, I remember going to the mall one day, like 20 minutes away with my friends, and we usually picked up some beer and had a few drinks when we went out, and they weren't going to do that day, and I couldn't understand why. I was like, if you have the choice to go to the mall with beer or without beer, why would you possibly choose not beer? Like, I just couldn't. And I mean, I ruminated over that for the whole ride there until they told me to shut up. I walked around and I just kept trying to figure it out, and I couldn't understand the way they thought.
Oh my God.
Like, so, that was probably, a hint that I had a problem. But I mean, I was an alcoholic for 20 years, and there's lots of dysfunction that went along that part of my life.
Right.
Drugs, alcohol, dealing drugs. You live that lifestyle, you're in a lot of very dangerous situations, and it shapes your personality. You need to become a chameleon to deal with things. You need to be very quick with your decision making and assessing situations.
Yes.
So
your anxiety has to be like through the roof. It's probably making you drink more.
It kind of is on a lower level, but it's weird. You kind of get comfortable in those environments. Like one time, we'll fast forward to many years later, right before I stopped drinking, I ended up going to jail for 2 days. And like after, just because nobody bailed me out,
Right.
It took a couple days to get out. But that was the longest stretch. I had gotten thrown in a tank to dry out a few times, but that was the longest stretch after like 2.5 days, and going through the processing and getting deliced and getting put into population and stuff like that. It was a whole different experience. And once I was in there, and once I got put into population and stuff, I was kind of assess things, and I was like, okay, if I have to do this, I've got it. Yeah. Like I can handle this. I understand how to make assessments, protect myself. I think I got this. And a sense of calm came over me. And when I got out of there, that actually scared me very much, because I was like, where am I here if I can make being in jail okay? Yeah. Like, that shouldn't be okay.
You're right.
And when I got myself to, so the fact that I made it okay, that I was like, okay, if I have to do this, I'll make it. Like, that really kind of scared me and shook me up. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, so that was kind of the beginning of my end, right. or part of it. So then I guess really, dysfunction and stuff. And then I turned 30, and I decided that it was difficult to rationalize why I wasn't a loser anymore. Because like when you're in your 20s, you're like, I'm young, hey.
That's what we do. Right.
Right. So I was 30, and I'm like, no, it's pretty obvious I'm a loser at this point. I mean, I always had a job. I always had a roof. I was fairly responsible for an alcoholic, but I mean, I wasn't doing anything with my life. My friends were, buying houses and having kids. And so I was like, okay, it's pretty obvious here. So I started falling into a deep depression. And then I met my ex-wife, and she really talked a good game. Like, she had her stuff together. Yeah. So I figured I'd latch on to her. Maybe she'd save me.
She can pull me out.
Yeah. So I did. And, we got married real quick, because it seemed like we're going to move and live together, and maybe we should do that because of her Catholic upbringing and stuff. And so we got married. My son was born. I pulled myself together, minimized my drinking. I started a business, bought a house, had a new car in the driveway. And that was when I really got depressed, because if you're a loser your whole life and you're unhappy, it's not real. Of course you're unhappy. You're a loser. That's what, life's unfair. You're a loser. Everything sucks. That's, it kind of rides with the mentality. But when I had pulled myself together and accomplished everything that society told me to do in order to be happy, and I was more unhappy than I was before, I was like, oh crap, now what? Like, how to survive failure. You pull yourself back up and you push forward. But how do you survive success? And that was, then the spiral started. Now all of a sudden I was kind of hopeless because I didn't see a way to ever be happy. So
this is what should make me happy. Why am I not happy?
Right. I rebelled against all that stuff and didn't do it. And that didn't make me happy. Then I embraced it and did it. And that didn't make me happy. And I don't see, door number 3. So, so now what? So that started to spiral. I just knew that I couldn't be with my ex-wife. I didn't know what happiness was or if it existed, but I knew it wasn't with her. She was pretty negative. So I ended that, and she moved. I was in Florida. She moved to Rhode Island with my son. And for 2 years, I just spiraled trying to get sober, but really diving into the booze. And, long story short, I moved to Rhode Island, couldn't stay sober, blew a gasket, moved back down to Florida, and then finally decided to try getting sober because I really wanted to die. It was just... I was at the end, and my body was shutting down. I had been a personal trainer most of that time. I was usually in pretty good shape, and my body was literally shutting down. My organs were starting to shut down, and I wasn't going to suffer for another 5 or 10 years. I just wanted it done. I was at the end of my rope. I was exhausted, so I sat there. My friend said, "Hey, listen, you got to get yourself together." He was letting me stay at his place.
Right.
He's like, "I'm trying to help you." And then he left, and I said, "Okay, I know where his gun is, and I know the combination. So it's decision time." And I sat there for about 3 or 4 hours deciding whether I was going to go get the gun and use it, or if I was going to try to... The only other thing that I had heard of was sobriety for possible happiness. So it was a very difficult decision because I really wanted the gun, but I had dabbled with suicide before, and I knew what it takes to actually do it. And it takes a lot. It's not an easy thing to do because it goes against nature. So you have to override nature tremendously to actually pull that off. So I was like, I don't think I'm envisioning doing it. And I'm like, I don't think the trigger's actually going to pull because I have this thing in the back of my head that says that there might be another way. And if I'm not a full victim, then I won't have the courage to pull the trigger. I need to make sure I'm a full victim. So I'll just do the AA thing for a while. And then if it doesn't work, then I'll have the clear conscience, and then I can just go end it. So this was my motivation.
That doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really think AA was going to work. I just wanted a clear conscience so I could follow through with the suicide.
Oh my goodness.
So as warped as that sounds, it's an important part of my story because, not that I recommend people trying to get there.
No.
I don't. Because you can't. And who knows, maybe we'll touch on that. You can't force yourself into deeper suffering because then you're consciously choosing it and it doesn't work.
Right.
So I was like, I'll give it a shot. So I gave it a shot, and there's something in it, certain lines in AA stuck out at me. And one of them was, half measures avail us nothing. So that means if you do it halfway, you don't get half the results. You get 0. If you do it 90% of the way, you don't get 90% of results, you get 0. So that really was helpful because every time going through the 12 steps, they're there to induce a spiritual awakening. And you need to go deep, and you need to surrender deep for them to actually work the way they're supposed to work, just like any spiritual work. So every time I wanted to balk at what I was doing or do it half-ass or, something like that, I would think about wanting to die. And I'm like, Glenn, if you do this even 95% of the way, you can't lie to yourself. You're going to do it 95% of the way. It's not going to work. You're going to go kill yourself, and you're not going to be able to do it because you're going to know that you didn't give it 100%. And then you're going to have to start the whole process over. And I don't have the energy for that. I just want this to work or die. Those are the only 2 options. So I would really give it 110% to make sure that I had my clean conscience that I wanted.
Right.
And, it's interesting because that's why I was doing it. But the result was me giving 110%. And when I gave 110%, the program worked amazingly for me. The other line is, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. And after my 5th step, I started having these spiritual awakenings. There's 12. So it was before I was halfway through, and I just blew open and continued to blow open throughout until I finished the steps, which was beginning to end about a 3-month period.
Wow.
So through that 3 months, I just literally went 180. I mean, everything in my brain worked differently. I saw life completely differently. I was walking around just in a perpetual state of bliss. People were like, what the hell happened to you?
What is wrong with you?
Yeah. Like, did you get stuck in traffic? And I'd be like, yeah, wasn't that awesome? You were stuck there, so you had to just be. Oh my God, I connected with so much peace and love. Did you do that? And they're like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm like, I couldn't even I couldn't even hear their negativity. I was just like, I don't know. It's just wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You should try it.
Yeah. So it took me about 1.5 years, 2 years to really get my feet back on the ground and learn to take the spiritual understandings and spiritual laws that I had opened up to and suddenly understood on a grand scale, to take those and learn how to implement them into my life and actually live here on earth with them.
Right. That's the interesting part, right?
Yeah. The duality of being a spiritual being, having a human experience.
Yes.
I
love that. I do. I think that's a great statement. So in AA, I have several friends that have been through the program, and I love hanging out with them because they don't drink and they have so much fun. Like, you don't have to have the alcohol to have fun. And like you said, when we're young and we come to alcohol, it's the inhibitions kind of go down when you're drinking and you feel like you're having so much fun, but you pay a price for it later. Like, especially as you get older, the inflammation is a big piece of it. Like, there's a lot to it. So I love hanging out with them. And I have found in a lot of the conversations we have, they are on a spiritual level. Were you spiritual or religious? And I do think there is a difference between religion and spirituality. I saw a great meme the other day, and it said religion, and it was a fish in a bowl in the ocean. And then it said spirituality, and it's just this fish in the ocean. And I'm like, oh man, that's fantastic.
Yeah, there's some truth to that.
Yes, it's combined, and I think it's exclusive is how I see it, where spirituality is inclusive, and it's really.
Yeah, I agree with that from a kind of a man-made mentality, because I think that religion doesn't have to be exclusive. I don't think it's innately inclusive or exclusive, I should say. I think man has kind of made it that way, and that's part of the problem with religion. But I don't like to say a problem with something without saying the benefit of it. I think that spirituality is inside of religion. I don't think they're pitted against each other. I don't think it's either or. I think spirituality is, you can have spirituality all by itself, or you can use religion to connect to your spirituality. And a lot of people enjoy structure.
Yes.
I would say more of a majority, although that's slowly shifting. I think, to have structure, to have somebody tell you kind of, hey, this is the way to connect to your God. A lot of people find that helpful. And a lot of people don't. So I'm one that doesn't. I don't identify with any particular religion, but boy, do I see the beauty and the specialness of the teachings of all of them. That's my tattoos here, is all different religions. So this is Judaism and Hindu and Christianity and Islam and Buddhism, and there's more. So it's all And then I have this writing on the bottom that's Arabic calligraphy that says, "As many paths to God as souls on earth."
Oh, wow.
So we can all find our own path. And if you want to use one of these religions, or, like Buddhism doesn't consider itself a religion, but a way of life or a thought process. If you want to use one of these things to help you connect to your spirituality and your path to whatever you believe in, then wonderful. The problem comes in, I think, when people are too connected with the structure and don't use it to get to their spirituality. Like, I think I heard just a little while ago, I hadn't heard this before, but it was something that Jesus said, something like, I don't know if I'm going to get it right, I'll try. The Sabbath is for man, man is not for the Sabbath.
Oh.
So it's saying that, it's the religion is supposed to be for us. We are not supposed to live our lives for it.
Right.
And the structure of it. It's like, you can go to church every day, twice a day, and observe all the holidays and all that stuff, and it doesn't make you a good person.
Right.
It doesn't make you connected. It doesn't make you spiritual. It doesn't make you anything. It just makes you consistent.
Yeah.
That's
great. That's a great analogy. I really like that. Yes.
But if you use all that time while you're there to connect to your source, then that makes you spiritual.
Right.
That can make you a good person. That can make you everything that you seek.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a great way to look at it, because I think in my head, I have for a long time, and probably still do at the core, feel like they are separate. So I'm glad that you said that, because you're right. You could use both of them to connect. And that's really what it's about. It's connecting.
Yeah. And I think, that this is, it's funny how things tie back into AA. AA is just such a spiritual program.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous was divinely guided in a similar fashion to the Bible and other texts, because I used to take people through the big book and take people through the steps for like 7 or 8 years after I get sober.
Right.
I don't do that now, but I'm very familiar with the text and the program. And every time I went through, I was blown away by the levels of spirituality and the teachings in that book. It's just, it's a spiritual text, and it's, so I think I lost my track of what I was going to say.
About how it comes back to.
Yeah. That's what it was. So letting go of resentment is a big part of the 12 steps. So after I went through those, I'm looking, and I had a major resentment with the Catholic Church that I was raised in. I was raised in Massachusetts right at the time when all the altar boy stuff was going on. Some of my friends were molested. And then later, some of my friends were prison guards when Father Porter went into prison, and it was a big thing, and it was noisy, and it captured a lot of my psyche, as well as a lot of other people around the world and in that area. So, and I had a couple other issues with the church, quite frankly. And I knew that I needed to cease fighting everything and everyone. So I needed to resolve my resentment towards the church. And that's when I started looking into it and looking at religions as a whole, studying them, looking into them, and finding why they were so popular. Like, why, what have they done right?
Yeah.
And then when I started seeing that, it became very clear to me that whatever they've done wrong was man-made. Whatever they've done wrong was misuse. Whatever they did wrong was disconnection from source and ego-driven.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with the religion itself.
Right.
There's wrong with some of the people. And, Mother Teresa helped me see that. It's like, I was like, if she can do the works that she did and be a Catholic nun, there's got to be something good about this.
Right. Yeah, so, and I agree.
Yeah, it can be used for good or bad.
Yes, absolutely. Fundamentally, the message is love in all religions, all I think all connection, if we could really all kind of just live and come from a place of love, what a beautiful world. But
That's it.
it will take a while to get to that. One of the things you mentioned earlier as you were talking was kind of finding happiness, and you seem like you have a good energy and basically live
I try.
happy. Were you, yeah, right? Do you feel like you've always been basically at your core a happy person? I know you went through the alcohol and that, but when you think about
that's a good question. Kind of. I mean, I've always been an optimist. We'll put it that way. Because my sister was a pessimist and I was an optimist. So when you have, which is very common to have one of each in the house, it's usually you oscillate. But so since she was one way and I was another way, maybe she wasn't a major pessimist. I don't even really know. But even if you're leaning in one way and somebody else is leaning in another way, and you live in the same house, the differences get very clear. So there was a definite difference, even at a young age, that I was looking for the positive or expecting it, as opposed to looking for the negative and embracing for it.
right.
So there is a possibility. Which like as soon as you asked that, I was like, I saw this like dynamic and there's studies on happiness, and there's this guy who teaches a class. I might be at Harvard, and I'm never going to remember his name, but he did this documentary about happiness, and happiness is in the title. I can see it, but I can't remember the other words in the title. But this documentary I saw, they really studied happiness, and what they said was that some people are more predisposed to happiness than others. But that's not the sole thing. You can dramatically, so like if you are predisposed to not be happy, you can go from being miserable most of the time to being happy most of the time. You may not hit the levels of, like 90% happy. You might end up at 70% and never go any higher, but you can make dramatic increases if you work on it. Whereas somebody that's predisposed might be able to go from 40 when they start working on this and go all the way to 90, so it's, they're a predisposition, and we can call that genetic or other, who knows. That does play a part, I believe, but it doesn't play as big a part as working on it does. We have more control over our own experience than we realize.
Yes, absolutely. And I do find it fascinating because I've read things that say it's just a decision. Happiness is a decision. You can choose it. And I do agree with that. I mean, it's like you can choose gratitude. I kind of look at it that way. It's like you can choose to be grateful for what you have, or you can choose to complain about what you don't have. And it's that same kind of thing. I can either see the good in this bad situation, or I can really wallow in the fact that I'm a victim and this is happening to me.
Right. Yeah. A lot of it is a choice, and it's, there's so much overlap and dichotomy in spirituality that it's, I think that as a spiritual teacher, this is the challenge, because it's finding the verbiage. And then when the overlap connects and the confusion sets in because of that, being able to walk people through and find a way that it clicks with them, because there is a dichotomy, because happiness is a decision, in a lot of ways, but in other ways, that kind of implies that if we decide to be happy, nothing's ever going to make us unhappy.
Right.
And that's just not true.
Right.
So the way I view kind of life is as much as I talk about happiness, it's not really about happiness. I don't think that that's our goal. Our goal is a deep sense of spirituality. And when we connect with that, it's more bodily, it's deeper, and it's way more powerful and way more enjoyable and way more fulfilling and contentful. Contentful is probably not a word. but I'll use
All
it
right.
anyway.
Dr. Seuss made up a bunch. We can make up words.
Yeah. It's not as much or it is more than happiness. Happiness feels good when we're in it, but it's kind of just like this high vibration that's fleeting. We can only just walk around like, oh, I'm so happy today. That ain't gonna last.
Right.
Fact, not going to happen. Not while you're here on earth. We are in an experiential reality, and we are here to experience. And we are going to experience highs and lows and ups and downs. And life is going to consist of a lot of different emotions and stuff. But I think what we're searching for is this deep sense of spirituality, this deep knowingness that we are loved, we are cared for, and ultimately everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can anchor into that, then when we get really, we can still experience some highs and embrace it. And then you go, if the thought comes in, this is probably not going to last forever, it doesn't feel like you're going to be let down. You just feel like you're going to go back to that deep, awesome, powerful sense of connection, which is even better than the happiness. So you're like, it's okay if this doesn't last forever. You know, and then when we're down, when we experience something we don't like, we go, oh, I'm experiencing something I don't like. I don't really enjoy this. But deeply, I know everything's okay. This too shall pass.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end up back, you know, and I'm really anchored in that. I can experience some low. I can sit there and cry without losing my mind.
Absolutely.
Without not knowing how it's going to play out and getting all fearful. And is this going to last forever? And how could this ever be good again? And oh my God, like, you know, that overwhelming, just lost feeling.
Right.
Like we don't have to ever get there. We can experience sadness and still be connected.
Yes.
You know, and that is really what we're seeking, I believe, is to really anchor into that peace and alignment with source that's deep within us.
Mm-hmm.
And then to me, I always use the example of going to the movies.
Okay.
And this is why I named my book, The Spiritual Being's Guide to a Happy Human Experience, because I think it's such a foundational thought in our journey and concept. So like going to the movies, you can go to a movie, you can literally cry. You can experience excitement where your heart rate goes up. You can laugh. You can get scared. But you don't dive under the seat when somebody pulls out a gun.
Right.
There's a part of your consciousness that's connected to safety. You know you're safe there. You know it's temporary. You know it's fleeting. You know it's just something on a screen, and there's something more when you leave the movie theater, that this actually isn't going to ultimately affect you. So you can actually go for the ride and experience it. Kind of, people specifically go to movies to get scared and to cry.
Absolutely.
So you're not avoiding it then, you know. Why? Because you feel safe. And you know that it's temporary and it's fleeting. This is the same mentality we need to have in life. If we are anchored as spiritual beings in the eternalness of what we are, and the connected to love and the connected to source, and that deep knowingness that we are okay and everything's going to work out and we're eternal and it's fine, that's our seat of safety. Then we can go interact with life and we go, oh, I'm sad. Oh, okay, I'll be sad for a little while. It's okay. I don't have to resist it. I'll come through. I'm still anchored here. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, that's fun. Cool. Okay, you know, but I'm still anchored here. We don't lose our seat of safety. And that's how we can interact with life without taking it so seriously. You know?
Love that. That's a great one. I love analogies because I'm a very visual person. So when somebody walks me through something I can visualize, I'm like, okay, that makes perfect sense. And one interview I did, gal was talking about kind of removing yourself and you become the observer. And that's what I thought of with the movie. When you're watching that, you become the observer and you're safe. If you can do that in those moments where this is just happening and I'm observing it without getting too caught up in it, let me just go down the rabbit hole. Let me look at it, ask what is it here to teach me. I do like that. I've been doing that when I'm frustrated or when any emotion comes up. I'm like, all right, what is this here to teach me? I've been doing a lot of that. That's really powerful.
It's very powerful because it creates space in between you and the event. And that's where your seat of safety is.
Mm-hmm.
What it also does from a psychological perspective is it disconnects the brain from a reactive interaction with life. Because, the way I see it is our whole life, we have been creating a perspective, a way of thinking, a way of interacting with life based on our experiences meshed with our personalities. Mm. So you can take two little kids and steal a crayon from each of them, and one of them's going to lose his mind.
Yeah.
The other one's going to go, oh, I wanted to use blue anyway. So that's personality based.
Right.
So the same experience affects different people different ways. That's why I say it's the experience meshed with the personality. Right. And we develop that over billions of experiences throughout our life. So we don't fully understand why we think the way we think, but what it is it's reactionary. And what happens is an experience comes in, which is stimulus. So mm-hmm. Stimuli comes in and a reaction automatically goes out, and we live like that.
Yes.
Stimulus, reaction. So becoming the observer puts space, and sometimes it can just be a half a second just to break that. And you will choose a conscious action instead of just reacting. Mm. So you tend to deal with the situations a lot better. You don't take it so seriously because you opened up that space where peace is. So yeah, becoming the observer is absolutely wonderful. Eckhart Tolle does a great job at teaching that. Michael Singer.
I've got several of his books. Yeah.
As soon as I moved to Florida a few years ago, I was like, I'm going to meet Michael Singer.
Oh, wow.
So I went to his place like within a few months of moving there.
Wow, good for you. I'm reading one of his books, and I want to say it was The Untethered Soul. That was the book that just kind of really, I was on the cusp of really opening up and what I would call becoming awake. And I read that book and I'm like, what? Why didn't I know this before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I saw him, the first time I saw him was on Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul Sunday years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, my God, that must have been 8 years ago, maybe more. And I was like, I played that thing. I was starting to do Reiki at my house, and I would have people over and take them upstairs one by one and leave them in my living room, like with snacks, watching spiritual stuff.
I love it.
And I would have Michael Singer playing downstairs the interview with Oprah about the untethered soul. And I'd be like, you guys.
Sit with this. Yeah. Blow your mind.
Yeah. So I love that. That's one of my top 3 books of all time. Mm-hmm. It's just so profound.
It is. It's, I was glad that I did it in a book club, because reading it alone, there were just so many questions that came up and things I wanted to talk about. So it was great. And we all just and it was interesting how we all interpreted it a little differently. So that was kind of fun too. But great, fantastic book. And speaking of books, you have one out. Let's talk about it.
I do. And yes. You know what? I happen to have a copy that this wasn't pre-planned in any way, shape, or form. Yes, it was. That's my book. So it's Down to Earth, The Spiritual Being's Guide to a Happy Human Experience. You can get it all the usual places like Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com and other places. But that's, I wanted to write something with an overarching, powerful concept. Like, I love getting to the core.
Yeah.
Because when I guess this is probably an important part about me and how I teach and how I think. When I went through the 12 steps and had all those spiritual awakenings, like what I landed in was core understandings. I just understood core beliefs, spiritual law, I think, different words you can use to describe it. But what happened is those deep understandings shifted in me, and I gained a different perspective. That's what spiritual awakening is. It's just a shift of perception. So I started seeing things differently, and I realized that all my problems, I didn't have to go through life and fix them all. And that is such an important part to me about spirituality, is if you shift your perspective, you just interact with life differently. And, it's like you can go from fear to hope in a moment by going, I'm so overwhelmed because when I got my spiritual awakenings, I was literally emotionally, physically, financially, emotionally, mentally bankrupt, physically. Every aspect of my life I had destroyed completely.
Wow.
I had nothing. And all of a sudden I had spiritual awakenings, and I'm like, oh, I got this. Oh, what? No job? Oh, go get one. Oh, no car? I'll get a job and save up and get one. Need a place to live? I'll find one. My son's 1,400 miles away. I'll figure things out and move. Like it was just so easy. And I just went through step by step, and everything just kind of solved itself. It was effortless. So it's that what I found is the deeper you can go, if you try to fix everything on the surface of your life, those are just symptoms. They're details. And most people talk in details and they think in details. And when I'm coaching, I'm just like, I'm kind of half listening to the words, but I'm looking for the deeper connection. Because if I can shift that, all those symptoms take care of themselves.
Yes.
So like I love going deep. I love shifting core stuff, because your whole life can change in an instant when you shift those.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of was my mentality of the book. I was like, how can I make this the deepest? So I started with that spiritual being having a human experience, because until we can anchor ourselves into that seat of safety and start interacting with life in different ways, we're never going to feel safe. We're never going, it's going to be a constant struggle. So that's primary. And then I get, and the title is Down to Earth, because I like to think I talk down to earth. So I'll give real examples of how to enhance your life, real time, what you should be doing when you're driving in traffic, getting upset. Like, I give specific things that you can exercises that you can do to shift that. And you can do it in other areas of your life too,
Yes. What is that about road rage? You get in the car and you're just, I spent a couple of years where I was like, I was in a really like Zen place. It was when I was first really diving into this. And I would be in Georgia or Texas, and those are two really heavily populated highway states. Like, it's just ridiculous, the amount of traffic. And I would get in the car and I'm like, all right, everything opens up for me. I love traffic. And I would go into it with that mindset, like, just every time I come off an exit, everything's just going to open up. And it did. It was like freaking me out. And I would be like, okay. So somebody would cut me off and I'm like, oh, they must have to pee. I could just stay in that place, and it was beautiful. I've kind of lost it, so I got to get back to that.
Well, yeah, I oscillate back and forth too. We're not going to do it perfectly, but that, what you did was so important, because like I was in the Dominican Republic, where I am now. I just moved here. I was here for 2 months, and I loved it. And I didn't really drive for 2 months.
Wow.
So I went back to Florida and I started driving, and I started getting upset, and I was like, oh, no, I'm not going back to that. So I went inside and I was like, what's going on here? And I'm like, well, every time somebody does kind of anything that I deem inappropriate, it bothers me. It's like, okay, why? And I'm like, I think it's getting in the way of my goal. It's like, what's my goal? My goal is to go from where I am home as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I didn't realize that was my goal until I looked inside and I started asking myself these questions. And I realized that my goal is to get from point A to point B as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So if anything disturbs that, my psyche is going to deem it as wrong and it's going to bother me. So if somebody's going too slow, that's wrong. If somebody goes too fast and scares me, well, that's wrong. If somebody cuts me off, that's wrong. And so I'm constantly, assessing situations as wrong because I am not, it's getting in the way of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, that's not good, So I was like, if whenever I'm thinking about something temporary, that means I'm ego driven. Whenever I'm thinking of something eternal, that means I'm spiritually driven.
Love that.
So I was like, okay, getting from point A to point B in a physical situation is obviously temporary because in a little while I will be home and it won't be an issue anymore. So my ego is driving my mentality. So I want to pick something eternal to drive my mentality. So how the heck can I bring eternalness into this situation? So I started thinking of principles. So what are eternal principles? Love, peace, bliss, those types of things are eternal principles. They never change. They're always available. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to bring one of those principles and pull it into my driving. So I said, I'm going to pick peace. So my goal is to make it from point A to point B in a state of peace.
Nice. Oh, that's good.
So now, since my psyche had a different goal to achieve peace, not to achieve efficiency, it started processing information differently. So when somebody cut me off, just like your example, when somebody cut me off, I was like, oh, they must have some place to be, because that's how my brain needed to process it in order for me to acquire peace.
Yeah.
So that is, and you can do that with basically anything. What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve in life? Are you trying to walk through life peacefully, or you are trying to accomplish things? Because if you're trying to accomplish things, then you're going to get frustrated a lot, because there's going to be obstacles, blocks, things are going to get more difficult. So anything that gets in your way of accomplishing something is going to bother you.
Right.
But if your goal is to accomplish your end goal in a state of peace the whole time, now all of a sudden your brain starts processing the obstacles differently. It doesn't see it as an obstacle. It just sees it as something that happened to come up along the way. And you just go, oh, well,
okay.
It is. It simply is. It's not good or bad. It just is. So I'll just, okay, so now what? What do I do? Do I peacefully go over the obstacle? Do I peacefully go around the obstacle? Do I peacefully look for a door through the obstacle? But whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to do it peacefully. And when we start living in that way, all of a sudden you can start seeing that baseline of peace and connection. And,
Yes. And that's all in your book, right?
Yeah, in one way or another, like my own, I wrote my book in 2019 and it released it at the end of 2019. So whatever ways of saying things, and, I like when I speak with you or a client, or when I'm writing my book, like none of it is, sometimes I use the same types of examples because I've been doing this for quite a while, and that's just how it goes. Right. Especially when you find a good one.
Yeah, you're like,
But for the most part, I just turn off my brain and this is how I work. I've always talked a lot, and I found that talking is my flow. I can shut off my brain while I'm speaking. I'm doing it now. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next, just stuff's coming.
Yeah.
So as I do that, I think I'm tapped into divine wisdom because stuff that comes out of my mouth and into my own personal thoughts, like how I created the peaceful driving, that wasn't me. Like, I didn't come up with that. That was tapping into divine wisdom, and it was a gift that it was given to me. So I just depend on that. So sometimes stuff comes out and I'm just as surprised as the person listening. I'm like, wow, that was really good. Like, way to go, divine wisdom.
Write that down.
Yeah. And, and sometimes people look at me like, seriously? Like, because they think I'm just as surprised as they are.
Right.
Right. So some of the stuff or the way I phrase things might not be in the book, but the whole mentality is, I've been on this path. When I got sober, that was over 17 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I've been living like this, functioning and speaking about it for over 17 years. So most of what I say is in there, and but it's constantly evolving,
Absolutely. Which that's
just like me.
Right. Right. I don't want to stay the same forever. I want to continue to grow and evolve. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about how everybody can connect with you.
Well, I made it very difficult and complicated.
Oh, why not? Right.
Yeah. You go to glenambrose.com. That's it.
Keep it simple.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe that's actually something I teach a lot. If you want to get closer to the truth, simplify. If you want to get further from the truth, complicate.
Yes. Absolutely.
That was something my father taught me many, many years ago that I never heard until I woke up. And then all of a sudden I was thinking about this type of stuff, and I was like, I remember my dad teaching me that. He was dead on. There's truth to that and everything. So yes, simplify. So it's Glenn Ambrose, Glenn with 2 N's, glenambrose.com. And I think I have close to 200 podcasts out there now. I've been doing it for like 7 years.
Yeah. And do you have a guy on with you? Are you?
Yes, Ben Barber. And he's been doing that podcast with me. It was his idea in the first place. I didn't even know what a podcast was. And he's my producer, and Dave DeAngelis is my other producer, and they were doing a podcast, and they're like, hey, we started a podcast. You want to come on? I was like, okay. So I go in there, and I was like, that was fun. They're like, man, you need to have your own podcast. I was like, okay. So what is this thing that I just did? What's a podcast? I think I like it, So we started doing one, and we've been doing it ever since.
That's great.
We're right in the middle. Ben's business has exploded. He's doing really wonderful, and his producing lots of different things. So we're kind of looking at, I may be doing it solo moving forward. We're right in a transition period. Who knows? But he's been such a blessing because, like I said, when I'm kind of channeling information, I just go. And then the information comes to an end. And sometimes it's abrupt. So I'm just like, so if you listen to my podcast, you'll hear me say things like, so there, a lot, because the information just stopped and I have no more flow. So Ben's always been there to pick up the ball and keep it rolling and ask me another question and feed me. He's been doing my live Q&As on Facebook and YouTube every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. I do those. I may even turn those into my podcast. Moving forward. I don't know, but, so he's been on all my videos and producing all my stuff for many years, since the beginning, really.
Right. Remind me, what's the name of your podcast?
Life Lessons and Laughter with Glenn Ambrose.
Yes. And that's the same on YouTube, right?
Yes. Yeah, you can just go to my YouTube channel. Again, just search Glenn Ambrose. Google Glenn Ambrose, and I should be all over the place because I've been releasing this stuff for so many years. Blog, I have a blog, Mindful Mondays, on my website. I haven't been writing it lately, but there's, probably over 100 blogs on there. All the podcasts, all the live videos, links to everything. I probably have other stuff that I'm forgetting.
You're like, just Google Glenn Ambrose. You'll
Yeah, everything you're
plethora
looking
of
for is,
information.
and if you can't find something or you're curious about something, email me and, get a pen and paper ready. It's glenn@glennambrose.com.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Simple, simple, simple.
I love it. Well, Glenn, this has been so much fun. I'm glad we got to connect. Thank you for coming on, talking about your book, sharing your journey and your wisdom. It's been fantastic. I love doing this because I always get something out of it. I hope somebody else out there does too.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you're doing it, because of that. Like as soon as we start talking, it's like, oh, you haven't been doing this too long yet. And you went right into why you enjoyed it. And I was like, beautiful. Because that's the best reason to do anything. That's our guidance system. We try to over intellectualize things and figure them out mentally. It's very simple. The best reason to do something is that you feel joy, you feel alive while you're doing it. And you obviously feel that while you're doing this. So congratulations on finding your joy and keep going.
Thanks. Yeah, I said the moment I don't have fun with this, I'm done.
That's what I did with my podcast. Like my business, when I first started it, I did many things because I didn't have any life coaching clients yet. Right. So I was still doing personal training. I was doing Reiki. I did all kinds of spiritual events on my business space. I had a book club. I had movie night. I had all kinds of stuff to bring in revenue. And then as my life coaching business expanded and grew and took up a larger part, I hit a spot where I was like, I have to get rid of everything that I don't fully enjoy. And all I kept was life coaching and the podcast. And this was many years ago, and nobody was listening to my podcast. There was no reason for me to keep doing it. But I said, do I enjoy it? That was the one question. And everything that I wasn't really enjoying, I got rid of. And everything that I enjoyed, I kept. And then I kept the podcast. And about 6 months later, I started uploading it to Insight Timer, and it took off internationally. And I was like, you can't make this stuff up. You can't plan. Follow the joy, and it will lead you in the right direction.
Yes. That's a great place to end. Thank you for that. I love it. All right. Well, thank you to everyone out there for tuning in, listening, watching. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you soon. Bye.